Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, that's what I thought. How are y'all? Okay, how about hanging in there? Okay. Midway through the semester, so I got everybody's assignment. Okay, so if you look on the syllabus tonight, we had guest speakers on the schedule. So please give them your undivided attention as you always would. Don't you dare have your phones out. Okay. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. And
I'm Officer Castillo. I've worked with the police department now for 7 years. Patrol, currently side patrol.
I'm also Matthew Cumnick. I've been with the police department for 4.5 years. I'm on the patrol division. I work on a different shift than Officer Castillo. I'm Philip Case, and I'm the assistant chief. Been there at the department for 22 years, and if you need a translation for you, I'll turn it into English for you.
My name's Scott Mentor. He's the assistant chief, and I'm the chief assistant. But we got sort of the same job. He's the second in command over the police department, and I'm the second in command at the district attorney's office. Been in the district attorney's office for 18 years this month. And before now, I was over in Murray County most of the time. For about 16 years, I was over there and ran that office. But when Burt Poston was elected as DA back in 2012, he made me the chief assistant. We came over here to Whitfield County, prosecute cases over here. All right, y'all want me to start? The reason I want to start is because there's going to be way more exciting than what I'm going to talk about, because they have videos and cool stuff. So we were told that we were going to talk a little bit about ethics tonight. So I'm going to talk to you specifically about the ethics of a prosecutor, of a district attorney, because we have some special ethical obligations that other lawyers don't have. What a district attorney is, we prosecute the criminal cases. These guys go out and make the cases, they do the investigations, they make the arrests, they do the hard work out in the field. They send those cases to us. We have to prove those cases in court, because if we can't prove them in court, get a jury to convict, or get a guilty plea, their efforts were wasted. So that's our job. That's where we come in the courtroom. In the state of Georgia, there are 49 different judicial districts. As you may know, there are 159 counties, so not every county has its own judicial district. It's usually just the bigger counties like Fulton County, where Atlanta is, down in Macon. The bigger cities have their own judicial circuit. Most of us have combined counties into a circuit. Our circuit is Whitfield and Murray County. That's the two circuits, the two counties that our circuit covers. In this particular circuit, the district attorney prosecutes both felony cases and misdemeanor cases. If you're not familiar with the term, felony is anything that's punishable by more than a year. Misdemeanor cases are anything that's punishable by a year or less. Okay? But in some circuits, the DAs only prosecute felonies, and they have a different prosecutor called the solicitor who prosecutes the misdemeanors. But in our circuit, we do both. We do them all. With every case that comes through court, we handle. We do superior court, which is where the felonies and the misdemeanor cases are usually heard. We do a little bit in probate court, but not much. They have their own prosecutor who handles that. We don't do city court because they have their own prosecutor. But we do juvenile court, which are kids under the age of 17. Okay? Now we're talking about why the ethics of a prosecutor are different than other lawyers. Most lawyers, other than prosecutors, are hired by a client. Okay? And their responsibility lies only with that client who hired them. As a prosecutor, I don't have one client. My client is every citizen in the state of Georgia. That's who I represent. When we stand up and we say state of Georgia versus Joe Smith, we're representing the citizens of the state of Georgia. We represent everybody. And in representing everybody in the state, that gives us a responsibility to be fair to everyone in the state. Because the guy that we're trying, he's also a citizen of the state. Even if he's not a citizen, he has the rights that a citizen would have. Everybody that we try has the same rights. So we have the duty to be fair, to do justice, and to be honest. Those are our three big duties as a prosecutor. While when we take a case to court, we do want to win. We don't want to win at all costs. We have to be fair, and we have to be ethical. And the law imposes on prosecutors certain ethical duties that other attorneys do not have. For instance, we are required to turn over anything that might hurt our case. We're required to turn that over to the defense attorney. So we can't hide anything. If some evidence comes in that is harmful to our case, but helps the defendant, we're required to turn that over. That's called Brady material. And the reason it's called Brady is that there is a United States Supreme Court case, and the defendant's name was Brady. And so we call that Brady material. So anything that we find out, we have to turn that over, even if it hurts us, especially if it hurts us. Because that's one of the duties of a prosecutor, the special duties of a prosecutor. Defense attorneys don't have to do that. If they find out something that hurts their client, it's actually their duty not to tell us that, because their only duty is to assist that one client. Our duties are to assist everyone in the state of Georgia, and that means doing justice. And sometimes doing justice is doing the right thing and turning over those things that hurt our case. Sometimes one of the things that we have to look at, when I said we have to be fair, we have to decide, of course, whether or not we're going to prosecute the case. And the two things we really look at, when you boil it right down, are: do we think they're guilty? Do we think they did it? And generally the answer to that question is yes. We very rarely get a case where we look at it and say, well, this guy's just 100% innocent. That very rarely happens. But the second thing we have to look at is, do we think the evidence proves that they're guilty? And that's the more important question. Can we take this case before a jury and prove that this person did it beyond a reasonable doubt? So those are the two questions we ask before we charge someone and take them to court. Now, once we've got them in court, we have to decide what are we going to offer them, because most cases are resolved in a plea negotiation. The vast majority of cases are resolved in plea negotiations. We've had trials a lot, but if we had to try every case, you'd have to hire a whole bunch more prosecutors and a whole bunch more judges and a whole bunch more clerks, because we just don't have enough staff to try every case. So most cases are resolved through a plea negotiation. So when we're deciding what we're going to offer as a plea negotiation, we have to take a lot of factors into account, such as the wishes of the victim, the protection of society, what we do in other similar cases to try to keep it fair. And sometimes what is fair and what the victim wants, those two things may not be the same. Sometimes, especially in a domestic violence or a familial situation, the victim doesn't want to do anything, doesn't want to prosecute it at all, because this might be their husband, who's charged, and that might be the breadwinner for the family, and they don't want him to go to jail, or they don't want him to have to pay a fine, because that's going to hurt the family's pocketbook. But we have to look at it and say, well, we've got to protect not only this family, but society as a whole. Do we prosecute the case? But sometimes it's the other way. I'll give you a specific example. When I was over in Murray County, we had a young man, 17 years old, just barely an adult as far as the law designates it, 17 years old, stole some tires off of a car. Jacked up the car, stole the tires off. And the victim was just adamant, I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I said, well, sir, in this particular case, because back then, it was a felony if you stole over $500, and these tires were worth more than that. I said, sir, the fullest extent of the law is 10 years in prison, and he's not going to get that. I'm just going to tell you, because he's a first offender, he's 17 years old. That's not what he's going to get. He's going to get probation. And but he was just very adamant. He wanted this young man to go to prison for 10 years because he stole his tires off his car. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to make my recommendation, which is going to be prison. But if you would like to address the court, address the judge during the plea, you're welcome to do that. So we did the plea. I made my recommendation of probation. He said his piece and told the judge he wanted him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and the judge looked at him and said exactly what I had said. He said, well, that's 10 years in prison, and I'm not going to give him that because that's not fair. But sometimes, but he got his say in court. He was able to say his piece, and we still did what we thought was right. So sometimes the victims think we're too harsh, and sometimes they think we're not harsh enough. Very rare that we actually hit that sweet spot in the middle, but sometimes it happens. We talked about rating material. I'll tell you an example of that. When we had a situation where it hurt our case, over in Murray County, Burt Poston, the DA, was prosecuting a very serious case. And we came to find out that the defendant had actually taken a polygraph that we didn't administer. We didn't administer polygraph. They had hired an expert to do it. And we found out about this sort of by accident. And then we looked into who the polygrapher was, and he was actually a very well-regarded polygrapher, who the GBI agent who was working the case said, if that guy says it, I believe it. And guess what? It turns out the defendant had passed the polygraph given by this polygrapher. So that's very helpful, obviously, to the defendant's case, but he can't use it in court because it wasn't stipulated to by us. Polygraphs can only be used in court if both sides agree to use it. And we hadn't agreed to it. They just did it on their own. So we could have kept that. We could have hidden that and kept that out of view of the jury. But Burt's decision was, no, we want the whole truth to be heard. So if we're going to try this, we're going to let that in because the whole truth needs to be heard because that's the fair thing to do. And as it turned out, that case ended up not actually being prosecuted. We couldn't prosecute it because of that particular polygraph, because it was a trustworthy polygraph. He had passed it. And Burt did not believe at that time we could go forward with the case. That hurt our case. But did we do justice? I think so. Other things that we have to consider are conflicts of interest. If we're related to a defendant or a victim, sometimes we'll have to pull out of the case and get another prosecutor from another circuit to come in and handle the case. A good example of that, Burt Poston, the district attorney, his family has a business here in town and they were burglarized. So we couldn't, nobody in the office could prosecute that case because we all worked for Burt. So we had to go out of the circuit and get another person to come in and handle it. And sometimes that's hard to do because we always think, well, we could do a better job. Pretty much every prosecutor thinks he's the best. So it's kind of hard to watch somebody else do it. But they handled it fine and it ended up pleading guilty, so it was fine. I had the same situation. My dad over in Murray County had something stolen from his house, and I would have loved to prosecute that case, but I couldn't do it. But since I wasn't the boss, we were able just to give it to another prosecutor in the office to handle it. Sometimes you don't have to get another person out of the office to do it. If another person in the office doesn't have that conflict, then they can handle it. And sometimes, unfortunately, we may be related to the defendant. That's happened a few times too, not to me personally, but to other members of our office. And then we usually on those, we'll try to get somebody from outside the office to handle it. So there's no perception that we're either treating him more harshly or better just because he's related to somebody in the office. All right. One other ethical thing I wanted to talk to you about are asset forfeiture funds. When these guys make a big drug arrest, sometimes the person will have a large amount of money, and if we can show that that money was drug proceeds are being used to facilitate the sale of drugs, or if it's a vehicle that it was used in the sale itself to transport the drugs, then the state can seize that property and actually take that away from the drug dealer. there has been, you may have seen some, if you watch the news, especially the Atlanta news, there's been some controversy about that down in the metro area because some of the offices down there, not that they were seizing it improperly, but what they were doing with the money once they got it was viewed to be unethical. It was not illegal, but it was viewed to be unethical because you had like one of the DAs down there spending it on Braves tickets for the staff. They would do like team building. They called it team building exercises, and they'd take the whole office to the Braves game. Or they had another DA in Douglas County who was like, he bought vehicles for everybody in the staff, even the secretaries to drive back and forth. You know, just stupid stuff like that. It wasn't illegal. I mean, he could do that, but it was unethical. Because when you guys hear about it, you're like, oh, world. Right? So that's a good test. A good test. If everybody finds out about it and they say, what in the world is he doing? That's probably not something you want to be doing. So our office doesn't do that. We use it simply for things, legitimate purposes in the office, like buying computers. We bought some new cubicles for the secretaries to work in the office, printers, office equipment, basically. We stay away from any kind of crazy things like throwing parties or going to Braves games, that kind of thing. So with that, I'm going to stop. Do you want to open it for questions now, or do you want to wait till these guys talk and then we'll open it for questions for everybody?
It's up to you. Do you maybe have any questions right now? Do you want to go ahead and ask? Or do you want to wait till the end? Okay, you got your answer.
I'm going to take just a few minutes of your time so I can turn it over to our experts here that can show you some things that are very entertaining as well as educational for you. Thank you for letting us come in tonight, have a few minutes of your classroom time to talk to you. The subject of ethics, especially when it comes to policing, has been something that's been on the media and news constantly for the last 12 months. And it's something that we don't take lightly at the Dalton Police Department. We hold the men and women that work for us to a very high standard of behavior. And we do investigate fully any allegation of misconduct or acts that would be construed by the public to be questioned. It's not a very pleasant job. We have a division that is assigned to do those types of investigations. One of the things that each officer does when they begin their career with us is we bring over the judge, and the officer is required to take an oath of office. And this oath of office requires them to basically swear that they're going to adhere to federal statutes and laws, state laws, and enforce the city ordinances according to the way that these laws and ordinances are written, and that they'll hold themselves to a higher standard. This oath of office is probably one of the things that people don't take as seriously as what they should, the men and women that go into the profession of law enforcement. If I am accused of a serious act of misconduct, more than likely when the GBI investigates it, they're going to come after me for an oath of office violation, which means that I've breached all ethical behaviors. And it's pretty hard for me not to be found guilty if I do that type of thing. So what we do with our officers is we try to teach them from the very beginning is that everything that you do is recorded. Everything that you do is part of open record, and that it needs to be above reproach. And two of the officers that we have here today, they even go further. Almost every encounter that these two young men engage in is recorded on a body camera. They're part of our test program because before we roll this whole thing out and have 87 sworn officers with cameras, we want to make sure that we've identified when they should be used, how they should be used, and how that information will be disseminated to the courts and to the public. So I'm sure you're going to have a question of whether we are in a body cam program. We're in a test and evaluation phase at this point because we don't want to make the mistakes that some of the larger agencies have that have entered into grants where they buy all these cameras, but then they find out they have $3 or $4 million worth of data storage and redaction and other things that they can't accomplish. So we are looking at it, and at some point in the near future, I'm hoping we'll have a policy in place, but it's still probably a little while out before we have the funds available for us to enter into that program to the extent we'd like to. But we do have some video cameras in the field, the mobile units that the officers wear, and every one of our black and white cars is equipped with high definition video recording devices and audio recording. So we are pushing that information out there. So, that's one of those things that we try to make sure the public knows that when they come in and ask questions about what we were doing, that there should be a pretty good recording or account of that that's stored in a digital medium. I'm going to turn it over to these guys now. They're going to answer questions, show you some videos. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have now, or you can stop them while they're talking to you and doing their thing, because it ain't going to hurt our feelings if you've got questions. If you don't have any questions, that's fine too. I expect you to have at least one question. Okay? All right.
All right, guys. Just the chief was talking about us having body cameras. Basically, is when me and officer come to carry. It's called a taser. It's an official name for it, but we just call it taser cam. You activate by pushing this button right here. It's actually recording all the time whenever we turn it on. And when you push the button to activate it, it records back 30 seconds. This particular feature has been pretty useful. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, you've got somebody at gunpoint, something like that. It's not automatically for you to switch hands from your guns to activate your taser. That's one of the things we found that's somewhat hard sometimes. It's also a good feature that it goes back 30 seconds. It doesn't record audio 30 seconds, but it records the video. We're going to show you a couple of body cam videos that I have recorded and also get recorded. It's kind of the age where this is where it's coming to. A lot of times it used to be just us swearing in, testifying before a judge that, hey, this is what happened, this is what I observed, and this is why I did what I did. More and more people, especially in juries, want to see a video. And it's just the times we're in. They want to see a video, they want to see that person do what they say they did. Remember, a lot of times we got called out after the fact. So we're not able to catch the crime that happened. But it's useful to talk when you record witnesses. Like DA here was saying, after the fact they might not want to prosecute, but during that time when you're there, they'll tell you, yeah, he hit me, he beat me, he did whatever, whatever the case may be. And once it's recorded, they can go back and say it didn't happen. That's your thoughts.
These devices right here are extremely helpful to our job. Every time I put this on, regardless of whether I have this on or not, I still do the same thing. That's part of being ethically or morally right in this job. This does not make me a better officer unless it enhances my casework. That's the only reason that I love wearing these, is it increases our quality of caseload. All right? All the guys that I work with here at the Dalton Police Department, I may not hang out with them personally off work or anything like that. I may not have the best personality style for them, but I know everybody that I work with at this department is ethically and morally right, and they constantly strive to do the right thing, especially in very chaotic, very hectic situations. I mean, if I were to ask you, what's the mascot of this university? Bam, too late. Right. You have to make a decision like that. That's right, that's reasonable, right? Now, it's extremely tough, very tough situations. Steve and I, we work some of the tougher neighborhoods in the city. We work some neighborhoods where people don't generally like us.
We've all seen where if you go to YouTube and you search cop block, there's hundreds and thousands of videos of people that all they want to do is just find a reason to videotape us. They'll come up and confront us, hey, what are you doing here? Let me see your badge. What's your badge number? What's your name? It's really just to try to trigger you to do something. They're trying to catch that wrong officer, and some of them have. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say every officer in the whole United States hasn't done something wrong. There's been plenty of cases that you've seen videos where officers have acted bad. Sometimes people forget this is a human job. We're all humans. You have a bad day, maybe your close friends, your family might see it. We have a bad day. We have a possibility that everybody sees it. The whole world. It can be on CNN. It can be anywhere. Sometimes, like I said, you have a bad day, you curse at somebody, you do something wrong, you know, it comes back. Like I said, then we have our policies that we have to hold to. We might not have done nothing illegal, but we have to be held to our policies. You know, if we get out here and just cuss somebody out because I have a headache, you know, and I didn't want to deal with that person. That's, you know, I shouldn't really be doing this job if I can't control my emotions that well. So.
Yeah, the big thing too is this is one of the few professions that you work in any career field where we're judged just as much about what we do outside of work as we do at work. I'll tell you what, nobody cares about what an employee over here at Red Lobster is doing after he gets off shift. But they certainly see us, and if I'm hanging out somewhere with a group of people that may not be ethically right, morally correct, it can jeopardize our career. It can. Like I said, it's one of those things where we constantly have to remain morally right and make solid decisions, not only in our careers, but in our personal lives. It's one of those things where it can be a stressor, but again, when you do the right thing and you're used to doing the right thing, it becomes natural, I tell you.
Like the officer company was saying, you know, it might be hard maybe. We sometimes talk about, you know, how you see cases out here in the news where officers might have stolen things, done things wrong, and we always want to think, you know, it's somewhere else. Luckily, I know I can say I've never seen it happen here. You know, I haven't seen somebody act unethical. You know, like I said, we're held to a very high standard. It got to a point when I first started my career where I would finish a traffic stop. A couple minutes later, I would get a call from my sergeant telling me, "Hey, I need you to come by and let me see your video from that last traffic stop you did." I don't know what it was. Maybe, I don't know, I could sit here and guess about it, but almost every traffic stop I did, somebody would complain about what I did, the reason I stopped them, the way I talked to them. And it just became a habit almost. I'm like, okay, Sarge, I got the video, I'll be right. So I would take the video to my sergeant, he would review it, see there's nothing wrong. And a lot of times call that person, "Hey, do you want to come see this video? You're telling me he cussed at you, yelled at you, did this. I'm not seeing this on the video during your home county." So a lot of times when they told them that, they're like, "Oh, no, never mind." That's it.
You know, and if there's anybody that's unethical, we don't want to work with anybody that's unethical. I'll put it to you that way, flat out. If there's somebody that's doing something wrong, even if it's somebody that I work with, that Officer Steele works with, point them out, because we don't want them with us. I can swear to that, okay? Because we don't want to do anything to jeopardize our careers, the oath that we took, and the duty we have towards the citizens of the city, state, and the country. All right, we take it very seriously.
Going back to the police cam videos, they can be very useful, like we talked. You know, they can show what sometimes show what perspective of what we're seeing. These not as much as the ones I've seen that hook up to the person's glasses, but there's not going to be a perfect solution, okay? Unless they're somehow able to put 365-degree cameras on our heads. You know, there's times where I'm seeing you, but I'm focusing on this guy,
Right.
and I'm, you have to split your attention. One of the great things about this is one of our things that we get accused more is maybe excessive force. I always try whenever I kind of feel something that's going to go wrong when we start recording, and that way I've captured some encounters that most of these are use of force encounters where you might hear, you know, "Oh, he slammed me on the ground for no reason." That's usually the story I always hear from other friends that tell me, "Hey man, you stopped so-and-so. He said you threw him on the ground. He wasn't doing nothing. He wasn't resisting. You just basically beat him up for no reason." Well, I always tell them, you tell your friend to come to the police department and talk. Like, all right, and I got the video for you. So in that certain case, it can be very useful. However, if you can imagine us coming to your house, middle of midnight, you in your night clothes, if you sleep in clothes, don't sleep in clothes, and us having encountered you in that position, would you want a video of you being out here where somebody can come and get it anytime during an open record night? You know, would you want a family member that's been a victim of a crime, a sexual battery, something like that, aggravated assault? Would you want their video, you know, for everybody to see? So that's where some of the problems with body cams are. You know, privacy. You know, when we enter people's houses all the time, we sometimes find people nude. We find dead bodies after the fact. It's just,
let's face it, folks, nobody's going to call us because they won the lottery. Nobody calls up and says, hey, I just got $1 million today. The first people want to call is the police to celebrate with, right? That's the nature of the business, folks. When we meet people, when we go on these calls, it could be the worst day of that person's life. And we have to treat it like that. It's not representative of that person that we're out with. You know, some studies say up to 90% of the people that we deal with have some sort of substance abuse issue, whether they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, that we encounter on a daily basis. Is that representative of who that person truly is? Right? A lot of people we have to deal with have mental health issues all the time.
And sometimes you see videos out there where people have, police have encountered somebody mentally ill, and they've had to do some things. You might not agree with it, but something they've had a body cam, and you see how that person, even though he's in the state he is in, there might be a time where you'll see a video. I have one where we had to drag somebody off the train tracks, and we had to force that person off the train tracks. He was trying to commit suicide by train. So it's just one of those things, you know. Body cams are a good tool, but the public, you have to all decide if this is something we all need. This is something that everybody here wants to expose to the world, you know, where we come to your house, and it's one of those, you know, debates that are probably going to keep going on, and that's why I'm glad this is still a training, the testing phase, instead of a full-blown, this is what you're going to do. Because once that gets established, you know, anybody can go to the police department and file an open record act and say, I want this incident. Well, okay. Why? Well, I just want it. Okay. And that's what some police departments have found. I believe it was Seattle, that these guys were just coming up and asking for all their body cam videos. And we're talking about tons of data that they had to turn over. They actually have to host, they call it a hackathon to figure out how to redact videos, how to blur faces. And I think they came up with a solution to it, but it wasn't easy, you know, because we're talking about your privacy. You know, a lot of times you're calling us, we're not just showing up at your house.
One of the major drawbacks to this, especially with the placement of this, Officer Castillo mentioned that there are some that are on glasses, most of them are body worn, right? Aspect body camera, towards the center part of our body. The first video I have up here is going to show you some of the drawbacks to this device. Notice that Officer Castillo and I typically wear these in the same area. Some other agencies have them center of the chest right here. That's a tremendous issue when, let's say, I do have to use my gun or my taser, God forbid, on somebody. What's going to happen is I'm going to draw out and, oh crap, all you're seeing is my forearms. That's it. Think about it, right? We're not going out here shooting like this, you know, like that. Not throwing anything from a vehicle at folks. You know, we're taught, and we're based on our training here, when we come out, all you're seeing is the inside of my arms. That could be a tremendous issue, you know? Well, I didn't see that the guy had a gun and he shot him. All I saw was the inside of your forearms. That was it. So there are some, it's not the end-all be-all. All right? First, so this video right here is a vacant residence with an open door.
That do recant. So the more evidence that you gather on the front end, the better that case is going to be. Get them locked into that statement, because they're going to tell you the truth there on the scene. Because at that time, they've just been hurt, they want help, they're going to tell you what happened. But once they've had time to think about it later on down the road, and they think, well, if he's not at work Monday, we might not get that paycheck. That's when the story starts to change, when everything's calmed down. So these guys are getting it documented on the front end, and that's evidence that we can use in trial, even if they recant later on. So we can still prove our case, even if they change their story later.
And ultimately, we want to help people, guys. I mean, everybody loves firefighters and EMS and everything like that, because they see you on a daily basis to help. Unfortunately, the real part of our job is we arrest people, okay? Sometimes we have to fight people. Sometimes very violent things happen in our job. But we ultimately, a ton of us that get in this job, we totally want to help. We are out there to help. And unfortunately, sometimes arrest is a way to help people and guide them through the criminal justice system so they can get some sort of rehabilitation or mediation or counseling or some sort of solution, drive them to some sort of solution that may help them in the long run. You know, we talked about the ethics. I will touch something real quick that he talked about as far as we cannot base cases off of what people have done in the past. Again, this goes back to having a personal bias against folks. They cannot mention anything in a trial about a person's criminal history. They can't talk about that guy that he just got out of prison for armed robbery. All they can talk about is just the incident you saw, right there. That's it. They can't bring that in there. Would that slight you if I told you his past and his history? Right? You're there only to be judged for what you did right then and there. I cannot come up to somebody and say, well, that guy used to break into houses all the time, and he's just sitting there eating McDonald's, so I'm going to go over there and talk to him. I'm going to go over there and detain him. Right? Has nothing to do with what he's doing right then and there.
This is going to be one of my videos. He was talking about we get into this to help people and stuff like that. But I also like some of the action part of it. You know, we've all seen cops and some of the stuff that goes on. Now that by far does not mean we do that every day. This happens to be one of the rare occasions that something like this happened. This particular case, the gentleman had been stopped by we can still call out, request assistance from Georgia State Patrol in Woodville County, which they did, and they were en route. But like I said, I stopped, and then I heard that he's going up to the jail, so I proceeded to go over there and help out the officer because we don't know what he was going to do over there.
You know, again, how many people in this room have been hit by a drunk driver before? How many people in this room know somebody that's been injured or killed by a drunk driver? All right? They're saying, I've been hit in my police car by a drunk driver. I can tell you it hurts. Okay? I can tell you again, you're not a bad person because you're DUI, but you can cause some serious repercussions. You can kill somebody. All right?
Because again, one of the problems with it, it was cold. I was wearing a coat. Sometimes the coat overlaps over the lens, and we're not able to get a clear view. We ended up.
Here's a great example. Look at this. He's got a rifle out, right? All right, let's. Sometimes.
But it doesn't mean you're authorized to just kick the guy for no reason, you know. As you can see, you know, I have no problem showing it to you. Everybody gets his hands, puts them behind his back, pick him up, and that was it. Take him to the car.
Take literally like 4 feet.
Yeah, I mean, literally, this is the jail parking lot. The jail sally port is right over there. So, that was that. This is another kind of high-risk situation. A little background on this.
Has to come out, because you can't just judge it based off of a clip or snippet of the video. We may have been perfectly fine in doing what we were doing. If we weren't, we'll answer for those things.
And again, this is a case where we make our own judgments on what to do with this guy. He did hit a police officer when he was kicking around. We could have charged him with assault of police officers, but going to jail is not what this guy needed. This guy needed some medical attention. He was having a bad trip on whatever drug he was on. You know, drugs plus being mentally disabled. It's not a good mixture. So we ended up with a little more. Paramedics are there, firefighters.
Officers are using force that's not appropriate. But we want to make sure that the force that they're using is based off of the training that we provide for them and within policy. And sometimes the officer didn't do anything wrong with the use of force, but we talked to them about things they could have done differently. Instead of using the taser on this mentally disturbed individual, the officers immediately recognized that they wasn't going to do anything but amp up the situation. But that's one of the things that they had a taser, and we decided to say, why did you use the taser versus trying to de-escalate the situation? Because that's one of our primary goals now when we deal with individuals is de-escalating the situation. Because, you know, the years of going in and amping up the situation so you could get a couple folks to go to jail for disorderly acting up, that's not the way law enforcement does business anymore. We're no longer warriors, we're guardians. And, not that we can't be put in that warrior mode where we have to do things with force, but most of what we do is for the betterment of society. We try to act ethically, and when we review these use of force incidents, we're looking to see if we can do something better in our best practices to make sure that we have more positive outcomes the next time we deal with that type of situation. And folks don't realize, I've got officers that think that we get way off in the weeds with it, but in reality, very little ever comes from one of the teaching moments we have with the officers, other than them doing it better next time. There's not any discipline if it's just something they could do better if it wasn't a violation. So.
All right, this particular one is a serving a warrant.
They had a domestic between her and her girlfriend. They've been fighting. Nothing had occurred at that time. Officer took a report because it was a domestic violence. It was not domestic violence, but it was one of those things that was better to document so we can build a history. Officer went about his shift. When he was doing a report, he decided to run the woman. The woman came back with a warrant. So he goes back, tries to arrest her. She starts complaining about her back being hurt. So whenever somebody has a complaint, sometimes we know a lot of times they're faking, but we can't take that risk of them actually being hurt, us taking them to jail and then something happening to them. So we take them to the hospital, we put a hold on them, and we tell the hospital, call us whenever she gets released from the hospital. That might be hours from now, might be days from now, depending on the injury, right? So I was lucky enough to get the call during first shift. I got the call, I have the warrant in hand, I have it with me. Go pick her up. Okay. I go pick her up. I have my body camera on. She's in there. She doesn't have a top on. She's in a gown. So another good usage for this body camera, I'm by myself. I don't want her saying, hey, this officer came in here, touched me, did anything, whatever to me. Before I go in, I activate my camera. I tell her, hey, Officer Castillo, you have a warrant for your arrest. I need you to get dressed for me. You're going to be going to jail. Well, she's already been released, remember. She's already been released. She's been free to go. She starts saying, well, I need to talk to the doctor. I'm like, the doctor's already talked to you. You're going to jail. I turn around. I let her put on, you seen it, it was 4 bras.
Yeah, she said, let me put on my bras. Plural.
She started putting on 4 bras. After I go there, she starts arguing more. I tell her, no, hey, that time to talk to your doctor has been long gone. You've already been released. You signed your paperwork, you're released. Go ahead and turn around for me. I don't want to force you to do this. She says, no, I'm not going to. I go put hands on her. She starts swimming around. I ended up jamming my thumb because one of those times she hit with my thumb. She jammed it. I throw her on the ground. I begin to handcuff her. About that time, a nurse comes in. I tell her, give me hospital security and come help me. Pick her up. I have the nurse put her shirts down because now she had a shirt and her bras. So I begin marking her out, and she starts pulling away again. I pull her down on the ground again. We ended up having to drag her out of the hospital emergency room, into my patrol car, and that was one thing. But all during this time, she was yelling, "You didn't read me my Miranda rights. You didn't read me my Miranda rights." I mean, yelling at the top of her lung in the emergency room. "You didn't read me my Miranda rights. I didn't have to read you the Miranda rights." You know, I told her what she was being arrested for. I didn't question her about the warrant, did anything. You know, so all this time she's yelling about it. So again, she believes that you have to read Miranda every time somebody gets arrested.
That's one of those people that got their legal education from television police program. Because on TV, when they're putting on the cuffs, they automatically read Miranda, right? That's not real world.
But again, I mean, a lot of these, especially in the case that you just saw, is that gentleman, I've already informed him he's under arrest. Is that gentleman resisting arrest at that point? Pulling away from him? All right? Trying to get away? Is he, you know? And all he had to say when I didn't have this camera on me was, those officers threw me on the ground. They just dumped me on the ground. Messed my back up. It's a good advantage as well, too, to have this. Because again, it shows the truth sometimes. This is the gentleman right here.
This is a mesh type cloth bag. They go along and
If that happens so often, that's great.
Oh yeah.
But there are certain devices, that's a good question. I mean, there's certain devices that we have to use, unfortunately, to restrain people. Handcuffs are just one tool that we have. We also have a device called hobbles, where it takes your legs and literally it's like a lasso. We tie it to the door jamb in our car so that you can't kick out a window. Okay? People do it, right? So you can't bang your head against the cage in our car and hurt yourself.
But it's just it's a mesh hood that goes over. It has like cloth from here down, and up here is just all mesh material. And it just has like a little tie thing at the top. And all it is just like little elastic that goes on. It's not really tight. It's just enough to cover from their nose down, keep them from spitting at you. It's not uncomfortable. It's not, like I said, it's just like a little, it's not a bag, but
Doesn't restrain her breathing in any sort of way. It's like the equivalent of having a turtleneck, I guess.
it's almost like having a mask, a medical mask on, from here down, but all the way around. And from here up, it's just mesh. So it doesn't affect us breathing or anything.
Yeah, you're doing it.